Funny how something as ordinary as slow Wi-Fi can unravel everything you thought you knew about the world around you. I moved here for peace, clean lawns, quiet mornings, and neighbors who minded their own business. But peace has a price, and sometimes it hides a predator right next door. She smiled like everything was fine, waved like we were friends. But behind her eyes was something calculated cold. All I did was change my password. I didn't know I was pulling the first thread of a much darker truth, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It started with something as simple as slow Wi-Fi. After 6 months of peace in Hillside Meadows, a quiet suburban community just outside Tacoma, I was beginning to feel like I had finally outrun the chaos of my past life. The divorce, the late nights debugging code for an ungrateful startup, the constant city noise. Here I had birds chirping and the morning neighbors who waved politely but didn't pry, and a front porch that caught just the right amount of sunlight for my coffee routine. But the quiet has a way of making you notice the little things, like how every evening around 8 p.m., my internet would crawl to a halt. YouTube videos started buffering, Zoom calls got choppy. At first I chalked it up to Comcast being Comcast, but then it became routine, predictable even. We'd exchanged maybe 4 sentences since I moved in, and 3 of those were her passive-aggressively hinting that my recycling bin was 1 inch too close to the sidewalk. At first I wasn't mad, more annoyed. People piggyback on their neighbor's Wi-Fi all the time, right? Maybe she didn't think I'd notice. Maybe she thought I was too chill to care. She was wrong. I changed the password enabled. MAC address filtering and logged out. Problem solved. No confrontation necessary. The next morning I sat on my porch sipping coffee, watching the rain break into steam on the sun-warmed driveway. That's when she stormed out of her house like a woman on a mission. Her designer raincoat billowed like a cape, her face twisted with purpose. She didn't knock, just stomped across my lawn and stood 2 steps below my porch. "You changed your Wi-Fi password," she accused, arms folded like she was filing a formal complaint. I blinked. "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious, Jalen," she snapped. "I've been using that connection for months, and now suddenly it's gone." I stared at her, momentarily stunned by the entitlement in her voice. "You were using my Wi-Fi without asking." She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "It's not like it costs you extra, it's just internet. God, you people always overreact to everything." There it was, the phrase, "you people." I set my coffee down slowly, feeling the warmth of the mug give way to a cold ripple through my chest. "Look, Tracy," I said evenly, "I don't owe you access to something I pay for. You want Wi-Fi? Call a provider." She scoffed. "Unbelievable. You don't belong here, and now you're trying to control what other people can use. This neighborhood used to have standards." And then she pulled out her phone. My stomach tightened, but I didn't move. "Yeah. Hi," she said into the speaker. "I'd like to report suspicious behavior. My neighbor, he's acting aggressively and may have hacked into my personal network. I feel unsafe." She looked me dead in the eyes as she said it, almost smiling. I didn't speak, didn't raise my voice. I just watched her perform. It was clear now. This wasn't about Wi-Fi. It never was. It was about power. Hers and my refusal to bow to it. She thought the cops would come see a black man with a tech background and make assumptions. She thought the badge would shield her lies. What she didn't know was that she'd just drawn attention to something far bigger than stolen Wi-Fi, because the night before, when I had been reviewing my router logs, I'd noticed something odd: encrypted traffic, not just anonymous browsing, encrypted file transfers, foreign servers, deep web domains. Something was off, and whatever Tracy was doing on my network wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. But I said nothing, not yet. I just picked up my coffee, took a long sip, and waited. The storm hadn't even started yet. 15 minutes later, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the still air like a blade. I didn't panic. I didn't even move from the porch. I'd been through this before. Well, not this exactly, but I'd seen what happened when people like me got painted with the wrong brush. The safest weapon I had was the truth and receipts. A Tacoma police cruiser pulled into my driveway, tires crunching softly over the wet gravel. 2 officers stepped out, one older, stocky white with a skeptical brow, the other younger, tall black with a face like stone. Their body cams blinked red. Good. Let them record everything. Tracy wasted no time. She rushed toward them like a Broadway actress at final curtain voice, trembling hands shaking dramatically. "Officers, thank God he's been harassing me, hacking into my network. I don't feel safe in my own home." Her voice cracked with just enough desperation to sound real, at least to someone who didn't know her. but I saw the glint in her eye. This wasn't fear, it was strategy. The black officer, his badge read. Officer Daniels held up a hand. "Ma'am, please take a breath. Start from the top. What exactly happened?" Tracy inhaled like she was about to deliver a soliloquy. I was sitting in my kitchen working remotely when my internet suddenly dropped. I realized my network had been tampered with. I walked outside to check my equipment, and she pointed at me with a trembling finger, started yelling, accusing me of stealing his Wi-Fi. He got aggressive, intimidating. I was afraid he'd come into my house. Officer Daniels turned his gaze to me, calm and unreadable. "Sir, is that accurate?" I stood slowly and walked down the steps, careful to keep my hands visible and my tone even. Not quite, officer. What she left out is that she's been illegally accessing my home Wi-Fi for months. I caught her device last night and changed the password. That's the only thing I did. She showed up angry, uninvited, and now she's spinning this story. The other officer, Miller, I think raised an eyebrow. "So you changed your own password, and that's why we're here." Daniels gave his partner a subtle look like, "Let's hear him out. Do you have proof of her accessing your network?" "Yes, sir, I do." I turned, walked back inside without waiting for permission, and left the door open. A soft silence hung in the air as they followed. Tracy stayed near the entrance, shifting nervously but trying to keep up the act. I opened my laptop and plugged in the USB stick I'd prepared the night before. My router logs every device that connects to it. "These 4 MAC addresses don't belong to me," I explained. "One of them literally calls itself Tracy Laptop." And here I clicked open a screenshot folder. Are the timestamps showing those devices connected while I was asleep? Repeatedly. The room grew still. Officer Daniels leaned in, scanning the screen. "This looks legitimate," he said slowly. "Encrypted connections, too. What's this traffic going to?" "Looks like a foreign server." I nodded. That's what caught my attention. I don't know exactly what she was doing, but it wasn't streaming Netflix. Behind us, Tracy cleared her throat, her voice tightening. "He's lying. He probably faked those logs. He's in IT, right? He knows how to make stuff look real." Daniels turned to her, finally letting some edge into his voice. "Ma'am, faking this kind of data would require access to a home-grade router's firmware, not to mention a consistent timeline and matched IP activity. That's not easy to fabricate, especially not overnight." Tracy's mouth twitched. She looked at me like she'd just seen a crack in her wall of control. She tried again. I felt threatened. "Isn't that enough?" Officer Miller stepped forward this time. "We don't arrest people based on feelings, ma'am. We follow facts, and right now, those facts are not in your favor." Her jaw clenched. "You're seriously taking his side?" "No," Daniels said, voice firm. "We're taking the side of evidence." She went quiet. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. She hadn't expected the cops to think. She'd expected them to act. I watched the officers trade glances again. "This needs to go higher," Daniels finally said. "We'll take a copy of those logs, sir. If you're comfortable, we'll reach out to our cybercrime unit to review this. There might be something bigger here." "Of course," I said. As I copied the files, I caught a glimpse of Tracy in the reflection of the screen. She wasn't staring at the officers anymore. She was staring at me. And this time she wasn't smiling. She knew something had shifted, and so did I. After the officers left, things didn't calm down. If anything, it got quieter in the wrong kind of way. The next 2 days, Tracy didn't storm over, didn't glare at me from her porch, didn't even walk her dog along the usual route. It was like she'd evaporated. But the silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. And I'd lived long enough to know that quiet people are either planning something or hiding something. I couldn't stop thinking about the encrypted traffic on my router logs. The kind of activity I'd seen wasn't just someone browsing Reddit under a VPN or sneaking into a geo-blocked show. No, this was sustained, timed international data movement. I wasn't a cybercrime expert, but I'd worked enough in cybersecurity to recognize a few red flags. The IP address her connection reached out to belonged to a server farm in Estonia, one I'd seen once before during a penetration testing job for a nonprofit that had been hacked. Back then, that breach was tied to a fake cancer charity that scammed thousands of elderly donors. The attackers had hidden behind layers of proxies, but the trace led to one known group, Aegis Echo, a black market data laundering ring. The odds of a suburban woman in Tacoma just casually connecting to one of those same servers? Almost zero. So I dug deeper. I spent the night combing through my router history packet logs, traffic, metadata, timestamps. Her devices. 4 of them had made repeated connections to forums, hidden behind Tor, to anonymous e-wallets, and even to a P2P network that distributed stolen personal information. At one point, I just stared at the screen. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. That was the scariest part. Somewhere deep down, I knew Tracy wasn't just a nosy neighbor with entitlement issues. She was running something, and she was using my house to do it. I backed everything up twice. 1 copy in the cloud, 1 on an encrypted SSD. I kept in my lockbox. I even uploaded the anonymized logs to a former colleague at a private cybersecurity firm in DC, someone I trusted, someone who owed me a favor, just in case. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, while she pretended to prune her hedges, I opened the box myself. Taped underneath the relay panel was a micro USB device, likely a packet sniffer, or worse, a reverse proxy dongle that could forward my network traffic elsewhere. Without my knowledge, I felt something cold settle in my spine. She was done hiding. This was escalation. This was war. I called Officer Daniels directly using the number he'd left on his card. I told him what I found. "We're no longer talking about Wi-Fi theft," he said. "This is federal, and depending on what's on that device, your neighbor might be connected to something bigger than we thought." He paused. "And you might be in danger." By the time the sun dipped below the pines that lined our block, I knew too much to pretend this was just a misunderstanding. The cyber unit took the USB sniffer for analysis. I was told not to speak about it to anyone, not my neighbors, not friends, not even online. Inside were grainy, scanned files, some redacted, others handwritten. Tracy Colburn wasn't her real name. Her birth name was Tessa Albrecht, a former IT security contractor based out of Fort Lauderdale. 6 years ago, she'd been investigated quietly for alleged data laundering. The case was buried after a key witness recanted. But according to Daniels, she didn't disappear. She rebranded, moved north, changed identities, bought a new dog, joined a new HOA. I stared at the documents for a long time, trying to merge the image of the woman next door, always in workout clothes, always with perfect nails, always pretending to be bothered by weeds in my yard, with someone who once helped breach a pediatric hospital's donation portal and siphon the funds offshore. It didn't compute, and yet somehow it made perfect sense. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. Daniels glanced toward the window. "We're coordinating with federal agents, but building a case takes time, especially when the suspect is tech-savvy, legally slippery, and knows how to cover her tracks." I shook my head. "You're telling me she might walk?" "I'm telling you," he said slowly, "you may be her best shot at catching herself." I didn't know exactly what he meant by that until later that evening. It was after 10 p.m. when I heard a soft knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It wasn't Tracy. It was her dog, or rather the leash, and the young girl from 2 houses down Madison holding it. "She let him out again," the girl said shyly. "He was in the middle of the road. Tracy's house was dark, no porch light, no flicker of TV. Just shadows." Something felt off. "Thanks, Maddie," I said, taking the leash and walking the dog to her porch. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Nothing against my better judgment. I tried the doorknob. Locked. Then I noticed a faint glow coming from a side window, barely visible, unless you were looking for it. I circled around the house, keeping close to the hedge line. The window was cracked. A laptop screen faced the wall, faint blue light blinking in rhythm. I crouched, watched. Every 15 seconds or so, the screen flashed with what looked like live command lines. She was still running, ops, still stealing, scamming, spoofing. Even now, I couldn't prove it just yet, but I had a strong hunch. She knew the investigation was closing in, and she wasn't planning to stick around. I rushed home, logged back into my system, and fired up a tool I hadn't used in years, a network mirroring shell I had built for penetration testing. Within minutes, I tapped into the shallow end of her outgoing packets. It confirmed my suspicion. She was uploading data dumps, CSV files labeled with strings like Med-A IDCI-10, donor full stripe 2018, and more medical info, credit card data, even what looked like partial voter rolls. She was cleaning house, and if she finished, she'd vanish again, leave town, change names, start over. But this time I wasn't going to just collect evidence. This time I was going to trap her. I spent the next few hours setting up a honeypot, a decoy data structure within my network disguised as an open vulnerability, something juicy, something tempting, a folder labeled Financial Backup 2022. Then I waited. It didn't take long, just the logs, timestamps, and 2 lines of text. She tried to breach my system. Again, I've got the packets mirrored. Proof is attached. By 8 a.m., he was at my door. He didn't come alone. This time, there were 2 unmarked cars parked discreetly across the street. A plainclothes woman with a DOJ badge tucked into her coat stepped out and nodded at me like we were partners in a case I didn't know I'd been assigned to. Inside, the tension was thick. Daniels reviewed the data silently while the DOJ agent, Special Agent Harper, scanned through screenshots, metadata, and mirrored logs on my external drive. Every now and then, she'd exchange looks with the cybercrime tech beside her, who only muttered one word repeatedly. Clean, as in airtight, untouched, admissible in court. Harper finally looked up at me. This puts her away. You understand that, right? I nodded. I'm not doing this for revenge. Good, she replied. She stopped walking. Her face froze. For a split second, something passed behind her eyes. Not fear, not shock. Betrayal. As if I'd wronged her. I want a lawyer, she said, lifting her chin. This is harassment. Harper stepped forward. You'll have one. After we inventory the devices in your home. Cross-reference the data pulled from your sniffer and confirm your connection to 7 flagged crypto wallets. That's when the cracks started to show. No, Tracy muttered. You're making a mistake. This isn't real. He planted something. He's in tech. He could fake all this. Her voice began rising too fast for her body to keep up. She stumbled forward, pointing directly at me. He's dangerous. He's been targeting me since he moved in. Just ask anyone. He doesn't belong here. It echoed across the street. I looked around and noticed something strange. No one backed her up. In fact, the old couple slowly turned and walked back into their house. The young mom from 2 doors down picked up her child and stepped behind her husband. For the first time, Tracy stood alone. This neighborhood was supposed to be safe, she screamed as agents guided her toward the unmarked SUV. I was safe until he showed up. Daniels turned to me, lips pursed. You all right? I wasn't sure how to answer. I felt like I'd just survived a storm, but somehow it still hovered over my chest. I don't know. I finally said, I don't feel like I won anything. He nodded slowly. That's how it goes. Sometimes, justice doesn't feel like a celebration, just resolution. As the SUV drove off with Tracy in the back seat, something inside me shifted. The fear was gone, but in its place was a kind of weight. The weight of truth, of proof, of having to fight for every inch of credibility when someone else can weaponize perception with a single lie. I didn't want to be a hero. I didn't even want attention. I just wanted to sit on my porch, drink coffee, and not have to wonder if the woman next door was running a criminal enterprise through my living room. The news vans came and went. Within 24 hours, Tracy's name was plastered across local broadcasts and digital headlines. Suburban woman arrested in multi-state cybercrime investigation. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Half the people claimed they always had a weird feeling about her. The other half argued over whether I'd invaded her privacy. I didn't comment. I didn't post. I just watched. From the same porch where it all started. The wind sounded different now. Maybe it was in my head, or maybe it was just quieter without her voice echoing through the hedges, barking orders at her dog, or accusing me of changing the neighborhood. For the first time since I moved in, I wasn't watching over my shoulder. I didn't have to worry if the police would believe my story. I didn't have to screenshot everything just in case I could breathe. But even in peace, there's still reflection. I kept asking myself why it had taken so long for anyone to see her for who she was. Why no one had questioned her until I did. Why it took digital packets, IP traces, and federal warrants to expose what had always been there in plain sight. Her sense of superiority, her manipulation, her dangerous calm. And maybe the harder question, how many others had she hurt before this? One evening about a week later, I was back on the porch, same chair, same coffee, same breeze, when Madison, the little girl from 2 houses down, came walking by again with her mom. She waved. Hi, Mr. Jalen. Her mom smiled too softer this time. Thank you, she said. No explanation, no long story. Just thank you. I nodded. That was enough. Later that night, I got an email from Agent Harper. The contents were short, clinical. The investigation has led to the takedown of 2 related servers and frozen over 2-3M in fraudulent assets. The data you provided was instrumental in mapping the network. Tracy Colburn, a.k.a. Tessa Albrecht, has been indicted on 8 federal counts, including identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to launder funds. There was one line at the end that caught me off guard. If you ever consider work in digital forensics, let us know. We could use people like you. I smiled at that. I wasn't going to take them up on it. I'd had enough of playing detective. I just wanted my life back, my real life, quiet, honest, offline. But something had changed in me. I wasn't the same man who moved in hoping to disappear into the background. I had learned the cost of silence, the risk of giving people the benefit of the doubt when they haven't earned it, and the power of proof, not just in court, but in life. Because sometimes the truth doesn't scream, it logs in, waits, watches, and when the time is right, it uploads.